My wife looked at me across the kitchen table on a Wednesday evening and told me she was carrying my brother's child. She didn't whisper it. She didn't cry. She sat there with her hands folded like she was presenting a quarterly report, and she said the words in a voice so practiced, so carefully rehearsed, that I understood immediately she had said this out loud before. To someone, maybe several someones, before she ever said it to me. I'm a molecular research scientist. I work with infectious disease models at a lab in Midtown Atlanta. My entire professional life is built on the principle that you do not panic when something unexpected happens in a controlled environment. You observe. You document. You respond with precision. People joke that I have no feelings. I have feelings. I just don't let them run experiments on me. So when Celeste said those words on that Wednesday, my brother's child, I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I felt my brain go very, very quiet, the way it does when I'm reading data that doesn't match the hypothesis. Something is wrong here. Let me find out exactly how wrong. How long, I said. 16 weeks. I did the math. 16 weeks ago, I was in Copenhagen for a conference. 7 days. She and my brother, Darian, had the whole house. The whole city. Who knows? She hesitated. Just half a second. That half second told me more than everything she said next. Your parents found out a few weeks ago. She took a breath. We sat down together. All of us. To figure out how to handle things. Handle things. I want you to sit with that phrase for a moment because it nearly escaped me the first time. We sat down together, all of us, to handle things. There had been a meeting, a family meeting, about my life, my marriage, my brother's betrayal, and no one in that room thought to call me. Not my mother who raised me. Not my father who told me at my wedding that Celeste was lucky to have me. Not my brother, who was my best man 6 years ago and stood at an altar and watched me promise my life to this woman. They sat in a room together and decided what to do with me. I wasn't a person in that meeting. I was a variable, a complication, something to be managed. I nodded once. I said, okay, and I walked to the bedroom. Celeste followed me to the doorway. I could hear her voice shifting into something urgent, the rehearsed composure cracking at the edges. Marcus, we need to talk about this. You can't just, we have to figure this out together. As adults, I opened the closet and pulled down my travel duffel from the top shelf. The good one. The one I'd bought for Copenhagen. I set it on the bed and started packing. Deliberate. Methodical. Shirts, then pants, then the chargers from the nightstand drawer. What are you doing? Her voice went up half an octave. I didn't answer. Marcus. Say something. Please. Yell at me. Tell me I'm terrible. Just say something. I thought about what I wanted to say. I thought about all the reasonable, measured, therapeutic things you're supposed to say in a moment like this. I thought about couples, counseling, and mediation, and taking the high road. And then I thought, they held a meeting, without me. And when something quieter. A door closing. I picked up my bag. Where are you going? Celeste's voice broke on the last word. I walked past her through the hallway and out the front door. Got in my car. I could see her in the rearview mirror, standing on the front porch in the November dark, already holding her phone to her ear. Calling my mother, probably. Or Darian. Or both. It didn't matter. My phone started ringing before I cleared the end of our street. Mom. I let it go. Dad. Let it go. Darian. Let it go. Celeste. Let it go. Then the cycle started over. Faster. More desperate. Like they'd coordinated. I turned onto the highway and drove south with no destination, the screen lighting up the inside of the car like something frantic and alive. I pulled off at a Texaco station in East Point and sat in the parking lot with the engine idling. 17 missed calls. A stack of texts I didn't open. I could feel the urgency radiating off the phone like heat. They wanted me to react. They needed me to react. An angry Marcus is a Marcus who shows up to the table. A Marcus who yells is still a Marcus who is playing the game. I opened my contacts and found my mother's name. I held my thumb on it until the menu appeared. Block this caller. Confirm. Then my father, my brother, Celeste, aunts, uncles, cousins who'd been at my wedding and would absolutely be making phone calls on their behalf by morning. Family friends who'd known me since high school. Anyone in that phone who had her number or his. Anyone who might tell them where I was. Block, 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 block. My phone went silent. The absence of sound was so complete, It was almost physical. Then I called my carrier, waited through the hold music, got a human being and said, "I need to change my number tonight." She asked why. I said, "I don't want to answer that question." New number active within 2 hours. I drove to an extended stay hotel near the airport, paid for a week in cash, and sat on the edge of a bed in room 317 while the city of Atlanta hummed its indifferent hum outside the window. I didn't sleep. I made lists. I want to be honest with you when I tell this story now. People always ask, "Weren't you devastated?" And I have to be careful how I answer, because the truth is complicated. Yes, something inside me was broken open that night. I knew that. I could feel it the way you feel, a tooth that's been pulled, this aching, hollow space where something solid used to be. But grief and devastation can coexist with clarity. I was heartbroken and I was clear. I knew exactly what had happened. And I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. Day 2. I called my supervisor at the lab before 8 in the morning. "Family crisis," I said. "I have 3 weeks of personal leave saved." He didn't push. I drove to our bank branch on Peachtree Street and walked up to a specialist, not a teller, and explained that I needed to open an individual account and transfer half of the balance from my joint account. She asked, gently, if my spouse was aware. I told her we were separating and that I was taking exactly what was legally mine. She nodded and printed the forms. By noon I had a new account. By 2 o'clock I had rerouted my direct deposit. By 4, I'd called our insurance provider and removed Celeste from every policy where my name was primary. The representative asked if I wanted to wait until divorce proceedings were finalized. "Today," I said. "Remove her today." I sat in my car in the parking garage afterward and pulled up property records on my phone. I'd bought our house in Buckhead 18 months before we married. We'd refinanced after the wedding, but I'd never gotten around to adding her name to the deed. I'd told myself I'd do it eventually. I thanked the version of me that never got around to it. I searched for divorce attorneys, read 40 reviews, chose the most expensive firm in the city, the kind with marble in the lobby and oil paintings on the walls, the kind that represents CEOs and professional athletes and people who need things handled cleanly. The attorney was a woman in her mid-50s with reading glasses she wore like punctuation. She listened to my entire story without interrupting, which told me everything I needed to know about her. When I finished, she said, "What outcome do you want?" I want it over. I want the house. I want no alimony, no mediation, no communication except through this office. I want to become someone they cannot find. She studied me for a long moment. Most people, she told me, come in here wanting revenge, dressed up as justice. They want the other party to suffer in a way they can witness. She said I was the first client in years who seemed to want something else entirely. "What do I want?" I asked. "Peace," she said. "Actual peace. That's harder to deliver than revenge, but I can do it." She had the divorce petition filed within 48 hours. A process server delivered it to the house in Buckhead on a Thursday afternoon. Along with it went a 30-day eviction notice. Celeste had a month to vacate the property she'd never legally owned. I found out later she called my parents the moment she opened the envelope, that she drove to their house in Decatur and sat in their kitchen and cried for 3 hours. My mother kept trying to reach me, burning through unknown numbers because the old ones bounced back, disconnected. My brother drove to the lab and tried to speak to my supervisor, who told him he had no information to share and suggested he contact my attorney. I know all of this because of a man named Terrence, a college friend who tracked me down 8 weeks later in an entirely different city, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Because somewhere between the attorney and the eviction notice, I made the decision I should have made first. I left Atlanta entirely. I'd requested an internal transfer within my company. There was an opening at our research facility in Charlotte, North Carolina, same title, same pay grade, no questions asked. My new supervisor shook my hand on a Monday morning and said, "We've heard good things." I said thank you and got to work. I found a 1-bedroom apartment in Noda. Clean, quiet, nothing on the walls yet. I found a therapist within the first week, not because I was falling apart, but because I knew the difference between managing feelings and processing them, and I didn't want to spend the next decade managing. My therapist, Dr. Anwin, had a calm she seemed to wear like a coat. In our first session, she asked what I was hoping to get from therapy. I said, "I want to make sure I'm not just running. I want to understand what I'm doing and why." She thought about that. Then she said, "Most people running don't ask that question. If you've ever been the stable one in a family, the one who's counted on to absorb impact, to smooth things over, to be reasonable in the face of unreasonable behavior, then you already know something about what I was carrying before any of this happened. There is a particular exhaustion that comes from being the person everyone assumes will be fine, the person who doesn't require handling. They're counting on my steadiness even now, I remember thinking. Even the meeting, even the way they planned around me, instead of including me, was premised on the assumption that I'd eventually come to the table because I always did, because I was Marcus. Dependable Marcus. He'll process it and come around. He always does. That assumption was the thing I buried in Atlanta. Week 6. My attorney called on a Wednesday, as she'd started doing. Routine update calls, she said, for documentation. Celeste had hired her own counsel, seeking settlement terms. The papers are clear, I told her. There's nothing to settle. My parents had sent a formal letter requesting family mediation. Divorce proceeds as filed, I said. Nothing else. My brother had sent a handwritten letter to my attorney's office. 7 pages, apparently. My attorney asked if I wanted her to scan it. I thought about it. 7 pages. Darian, who was never eloquent, who communicated in sports metaphors and shrugs, had sat down and filled 7 pages trying to reach me. Part of me, a small, stubborn part, felt the weight of that. We'd grown up sharing a room until I was 12. I'd been at his college graduation. I'd taught him to drive a manual transmission in a parking lot in Stone Mountain. Shred it, I said. The silence on her end lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then, understood. That was the moment, I think, when she realized I was serious. Not performing. Not posturing. Done. 4 months in, I was reorganizing files in my apartment when I walked into a coffee shop near my gym and heard someone say my name in a voice I hadn't heard in years. Terrence. We'd been close in undergrad. He did something in commercial real estate now. He looked at me like I was a hallucination. We sat. I let him talk. He'd been to my parents' house for Thanksgiving. They'd all been there, Celeste and my brother and my parents, under one roof. He described it carefully, like he was delivering news he wasn't sure he should be delivering. My mother kept setting a place for me at the table. My father barely spoke. Darian had apparently started drinking more than was comfortable to watch. Celeste moved through the meal like someone walking on a wound. They don't know where you are, Terrence said. I know. Your mom is. Marcus, she's not okay. I'm sorry to hear that. He stared at me. You're sorry to hear that. Yes. You don't seem sorry. I am sorry that she's hurting. I'm not sorry for my decision. He sat with that. Then he asked the question they all eventually ask. Don't you think that's extreme? I looked at him, really looked at him, and thought about how to answer honestly. Here is what extreme looks like to me, I said. Extreme is sitting in a room with your son's wife and your other son and deciding together what to tell him and when, and then letting him come home from work on a regular Wednesday night and find out that the entire shape of his life has changed and everyone who was supposed to love him already knew. That is extreme. What I did was leave. People leave. People leave all the time and nobody calls it extreme. He didn't have an answer for that. He texted me 3 days later from a number I didn't recognize. Said he'd found my new number through LinkedIn. Said my brother had lost his job, something about the situation becoming public knowledge at his firm. That my mother was on sleep medication. That my father looked 10 years older than his age. I read the message twice. Then I replied, I'm doing well. Thank you for letting me know. And I blocked him. Honestly, and I say this not to sound cold, but because it's true, I had made a decision about what I was carrying. Grief has weight. Guilt has weight. The question every morning is, what are you choosing to pick up? I had set them down. Not out of cruelty, out of survival. There is a version of this story where I go back. Where I sit down at the table and have the conversations and grind through the counseling and hold my mother's hand while she cries. I know that version. I have watched people choose that version. Some of them healed. Some of them are still in rooms arguing about the same wound 15 years later. I was not willing to find out which one I'd be. I met Vivienne 8 months after I left Atlanta. She was a textile conservator at a museum downtown, spent her days preserving things people thought were beyond saving. We met at a public lecture about material science. She was smarter than anyone in the room and the only person who seemed bored by her own intelligence. We got coffee. Then dinner. Then more dinners. Third date, she asked why I'd moved to Charlotte. I told her everything. The affair, the pregnancy, the meeting, the silence, the departure. She listened the way she worked carefully, with total attention, touching nothing she hadn't assessed yet. When I finished, she said, Do you hate them? No. Do you miss them? I thought about it. I miss who I thought they were. She nodded. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't tell me I should reach out. Just moved on to asking about my research. And I remember thinking, this is what it feels like when someone respects the edges of a thing. We kept seeing each other. She met my colleagues. They loved her. I realized I was building something that didn't have fault lines running through it. My attorney called 14 months after I left. The divorce was finalized. The house in Buckhead sold remote closing. As requested, proceeds wired to my account. Celeste had vacated the property and moved in with Darian at my parents' house in Decatur. All four of them, under one roof, managing the situation they'd planned for together. I was at my desk when I got the call. I swiveled my chair to look out the window at the Charlotte skyline. Okay, I said. Is there anything else? No, my attorney said. A pause. You're getting on well? Very. Another pause. Longer. I've had this job for 22 years. You're one of 3 clients I've never worried about. Thank you, I said. Send the final paperwork. I got back to work. The samples didn't know anything about my personal life. I have always appreciated that about science. I got promoted 9 months later. Senior research lead. My own team. A significant budget increase. The kind of institutional recognition that takes some people an entire career to receive. I took Vivienne to dinner to celebrate. She raised her glass and said she was proud of me, and I realized I hadn't heard that phrase from someone I trusted in so long that it landed differently than it should have. I should have done this years ago, I said. Done what? Built something that was actually mine. She thought about that. You couldn't have built this until you left the other thing. You needed both. That is one of the truest things anyone has ever said to me. There is a mistake most people make when they are hurt by their family. They believe that if they can just explain the wound clearly enough, precisely enough, if they can find exactly the right words, the person who hurt them will finally understand. And maybe they will. But understanding is not the same as changing. And waiting for someone to understand you is not the same as healing. I spent years before any of this happened, being deeply legible to people who used that legibility to predict me, to rely on me, to assume I'd absorb whatever came. What I learned in that extended stay hotel room in Atlanta was that disappearing truly, completely, without explanation was the one thing none of them had planned for, because it required them to sit with consequences they couldn't manage. It left the silence entirely in their hands. They wanted me to fight so they could negotiate. I never gave them a table to negotiate at. Vivienne and I got engaged on a hiking trail on a Saturday morning in October. I had the ring in my jacket pocket. We stopped at an overlook, and she was pointing out something about the light on the ridge, and I thought, right now. Not because it was perfectly planned, because she was mid-sentence about something beautiful, and I wanted to spend my life listening to her mid-sentence. She said yes before I finished asking. We called her family that night. Her mother cried. Her father made a joke about finally getting me in writing. Her sister started planning the shower within the hour. After we hung up, Vivienne looked at me and said, "Do you want to tell your family?" "I don't have family to tell," I said. "I have you and yours." She held me for a long time and didn't say anything. That's one of her gifts. She knows when words are just noise. The wedding was small, 60 people. Her family, a handful of colleagues who'd become friends. 2 people from my Charlotte life who'd earned the invitation. We married in April at a botanical garden outside the city. She wore something simple and was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Her father walked her down the aisle. Her mother cried again, the good kind. During the vows, I looked at her family in the front row, these people who had welcomed me without documentation or explanation, who'd never once asked what was wrong with me, that I arrived without a past, and I felt something I can only describe as structural, like a beam settling into place. This is what family is supposed to feel like. Not obligation, not management, not meetings held behind closed doors. This, Terrence, but names don't matter, sent one more email 8 months after the wedding. He said he was done sending updates, but he thought I should know. My parents had sold the house in Decatur and moved somewhere smaller. My father's health had not recovered. My mother looked, by his account, like a woman who had misplaced something she couldn't name. Darian and Celeste had apparently married a quiet ceremony. No announcement, and separated less than a year later. He was working somewhere part-time now. She was raising their daughter mostly alone, still living with my parents at the new address. The daughter was 3 years old. He mentioned her in case I was wondering. I wasn't. But I hoped she was okay. I hoped she had people around her who made her feel like a person, not a variable. That wasn't her fault. Any of it. None of it was her fault. Vivian was pregnant by the time I read that email. We told her family over dinner, and her mother made a sound I'd never heard a human being make: pure, unfiltered joy, like a child who just got exactly what they asked for. Her father shook my hand for a long time. Her sister started a group chat with gift ideas before we'd finished dessert. Her mother asked, gently, over coffee, whether my family knew. "We don't speak," I said. "Not ever." She touched my hand. "Their loss," she said, and moved on. "I want to ask you something before we close this out, and I want you to sit with it honestly, not just give the answer that sounds right. If someone you loved, a parent, a sibling, a spouse, organized a meeting about your life without you, and decided without you how your pain would be handled, and then looked at you afterward and said, 'We did it for the good of the family,' what would you do? Would you stay? Would you fight your way back into a room that had already voted on you? Or would you walk out that door and never look back? I'm not telling you my choice was easy. I'm not telling you it didn't cost anything. Some nights in that first hotel room I lay there and felt the full weight of what I was giving up, not just Celeste, not just Darian, but my mother's voice, my father's laugh, 23 years of holidays and inside jokes, and the particular texture of a family that was mine even when it was flawed. I gave all of that up. I know what that cost. But here is what I know about myself. I cannot live in a house where the foundation is someone else's decision about how much I matter. I tried it for 6 years without knowing that's what I was doing. I am not built for it. People think revenge means confrontation, the big speech, the dramatic moment where you make them understand what they did. That's not revenge. That's a gift to them. It gives them a chance to respond, to explain, to rewrite the narrative. Real consequence is quieter. Real consequence is becoming unreachable. It's building a life so full and so real that there is genuinely no room for the people who treated you like furniture. It's not making them hurt. It's making them irrelevant. Right now, somewhere 3 states away, a woman picks up her phone most evenings and dials a number she has memorized so completely she doesn't even think about the digits anymore. It rings once, then twice, and then a recorded voice tells her what it always tells her. The number you are trying to reach is no longer in service. She's heard that recording hundreds of times, maybe more. She hangs up and sits in the kitchen of a smaller house in a quieter neighborhood and thinks about where I might be, whether I'm safe, whether I ever think about her. I don't think about her the way she's imagining, not with anger, not even with grief anymore. More like the way you think about a house you used to live in. It shaped you, you know it, and then you drove away and didn't go back. Here in Charlotte, here in this apartment with Vivienne's books on my shelves and ultrasound photos on our refrigerator and her family coming for Sunday dinner this week, I am the most present I have ever been. Every morning I wake up and choose this day. Nobody manages me. Nobody plans around me. Nobody holds a meeting about my future without sending me the invitation. I built this from nothing, from a gas station parking lot in Atlanta at 11 o'clock at night, from a hotel room with generic art on the walls and too many pillows on the bed. I built it one blocked contact at a time, one clean decision at a time, and I would do it again without hesitation. If you've made it to the end of this story, I want to know what you think. Drop a 1-inch the comments if you think I made the right call, complete silence, complete exit. Drop a 2 if you think I went too far, that some kind of confrontation or closure was owed. Drop a 3 if you honestly don't know if this story sat with you in a way that's hard to name. I read every comment. I want to know where you land on this. And tell me where in the world you're watching from. What time is it there right now? There's something I love about knowing this story is being heard in different time zones, by people living completely different lives, maybe people who recognize something in it. If you've ever been the person everyone assumed would be fine, the steady one, the reliable one, the one who doesn't require handling this story, is yours. I see you. And I hope you know that stability is not the same as invincibility. You are allowed to close the door. If this story moved you at all, please hit subscribe. There are more stories here, people who made impossible choices, who rebuilt from rubble, who refused to be managed. I'll keep telling them as long as you keep showing up. And you showing up every single time means more than you know. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined, set in Atlanta and Charlotte to create original content. Any resemblance to real people, living or dead, or to actual events, is entirely coincidental.